All right, everybody. Welcome back to another week of Growing with My Fellow Growers. I'm your host, finally back, Jack Greenstock, this week. And I'm joined as always by a panel of amazing growers and IPM specialists as well. Just general badass dude. I'll pass it over first to him, change it up a little bit to Matthew Gates.
Yeah, hey everyone, this is Matthew Gates, Integrated Pest Management Specialist. If you are interested in some free pest information, you can come across my YouTube channel, Zentanol, also my Instagram at SyncAngel, where I just posted a really interesting video about jumping spiders and their two big front eyes, how they can shift their retinas inside their body. And because it had a clear body, you could really see that easily, and people really found it interesting. So yeah, you can find me there.
It was pretty cool. I definitely watched that. I was just kind of demonstrating how you could see like there's these two little things behind their eyes, and as they looked a certain way, you could see it kind of shifting around in their head. So very cool information as always. And next up, Spartan Grown.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you, everybody. This is Spartan Grown. You can find me on Instagram. That's my only social media. I'm still got a lot of pretenders on Facebook, I guess, but only on Instagram, Spartan Grown, all one word, no spaces. And if you don't have an Instagram, you can shoot me an email at spartangrown@gmail.com. And I know both organic and synthetic gardening, so I can help you with either.
All righty. I just made it so everybody could share a screen if anybody wants to share something later on. And next up, Kyle Breeder.
Hey everybody, my name is Kyle Breeder. I'm a cannabis breeder and genetic consultant. If you're into either of those things, you can find seeds and stuff like that on my website, which is purebreeding.com. Happy to be here. A lot of cool stuff coming up in the works. I'll be able to release a little bit more in the future. But yeah, just happy to be here. I'm glad we're all still alive and safe and helping people. And yeah.
Happy to have you back. Next up, Noah the Grower.
How's it going, everybody? I was in Las Vegas last weekend, but happy to be back with everybody. I'm Noah the Grower for Instagram. You can find me there. I've been a medical grower for, I don't even know, 11, 12 years now. And I've been involved in cannabis my whole life, and happy to be here.
Happy to have you back. And last and certainly not least, I think Aaron the Grower is joining us later, but the American one.
Oops, sorry. Yeah, I'm the American one on the YouTubes and the American one _ with _ Keens on the IGs. And Jack and panel, it's great to be here. It's good to see people in chat. And yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Definitely some great people. Sungrown 707, Ancient Soul Grown, Rowdy 420, Sour Diesel Tangy, Smot Poker, just to name a few. There's definitely a lot of great people. Make sure you're in the live chat. If you haven't already clicked over to that, it'll make sure you can see all the messages and you're not randomly having ones filtered out, and you could really participate in the whole community discussion. And if your questions are answered in the chat, which oftentimes panel members like Spartan and others will answer back in the chat, you might not be able to see it because YouTube decides to arbitrarily filter out certain things. So make sure you're in that live chat. But without further ado, the American one brought up a pretty good topic right before the show. And so I was like, we got to go live and talk about this. So
all right, so yeah, let me frame it better and adjust it just a tad bit. All right, so you're going to do a hash run and you have two different plants, and you're going to end up with an ounce of hash off of each one, okay? Off of the same run, the same thing, okay? But one plant has big resin heads, fat big resin heads, and one plant has smaller resin heads, but I guess like more resin glands. Which one do you think would be better? Is there a difference? And yeah, why?
I'll start and I'll say that yes, there is a difference because physically the size of the resin is different. So it melts differently. It's got a different surface area. And in my experience, a lot of people don't tend to love the 20 micron bag, the 45 micron bag, unless you're growing sativas that have really small, highly developed resin heads. It tends to be, and for the longest time, the gold bag was the 73 and the 90 micron bags. So those are a little bit bigger. So if we're just talking even like 45 versus 90, I would take the 90 bag. And if we're going to talk about an ounce and let's say 80 or 90% of it's in my 90 to 120 bag, I'd rather have that than 80 to 90% of it be in the 20 to 45 bag, because 99 out of 100 people I come across prefer that kind of higher bag. And that tends to be where maybe it's anecdotal and maybe there is also some science behind it. Like maybe there's more cannabinoids in a larger resin head because it has more space. It can physically hold more and get more swelled up. But I'm not pulling that from any scientific data. That's just my guess. But across the board, I would say most people are looking for larger resin up into, I would say like above 160, because most of the time that's more like the hairs, like 160 to 120. People call that like food grade. And you're not typically seeing like full melt hash in those ranges. So I would say I would err on the larger side personally.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking more like, I think whenever I've ever done bubble hash stuff, between 70 and 90 is the best. I don't care what plant I ever did, those were the best. But I guess some people were saying even they have even larger resin heads than that are good. You know what I mean? Have you guys ever heard of that? Like,
Well,
I guess the 120, yeah.
I think the most desirable thing, just in my head, thinking about it physically speaking, is that if you had if they in the end weighed the same volume wise, but it was the difference between a lot of small heads or a few large heads, I would much rather have the few large heads because there's less waxes and lipids that we're trying to remove anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
There's gonna be wax and lipid on the outside of every trichome. So if you have more trichomes, it's gonna be more waxes to pull out. So just in that aspect of it, I think the large would be better. But as far as, I mean, if you can guarantee it's the same volume, I mean, just see what the effect is. I don't know that there's a different, when you say that you like the 73 better, you like the 73 better because of the flavor, or you like the 73 better for another reason?
Well,
Personally,
yeah, I think it's both. It's flavor and the high. It's just better quality for me.
it's also the melt,
It's either
the main
70 or
thing.
90. Yeah, the melt. Yeah,
So and
yeah.
also think about a joint. If you roll a joint that's that fat around, that's like got a lot of surface area, it like as a cannon at the end, it's going to be a little bit harsher to tug on than a pencil sized joint because the cherry is much larger. So surface area does matter in terms of like when you're heating something up, it'll melt quicker or slower based on the surface area. And also like a bong bowl, if you like hit the corner of the bowl versus like lighting the entire top of the bowl, like the larger surface area, you're burning more material, things like that. And having experience from smoking resin a lot, I used to do full keef bowls and hash bowls and things like that. The smaller resin burns hotter, it seems. Like when you're erupting a lot of smaller resin heads, it just burns a little bit harsher in my throat than when I'm burning a 73, a 90, or even a 120. I think maybe because there's more of them, there's more larger, or there's fewer large heads. So like, I don't know, maybe when the resin head pops, there's like something being given off that makes it more harsh. And if there's 1,000 of them versus 100 of them, 1,000 little pops versus 100 large pops, I don't know. But it's definitely interesting because I noticed a
Yeah, I
distinct
think it's what
experience
Spartan
difference.
said about the wax and lipids, because if you have like little ones, they're all covered with that. So maybe 50% of that head, or whatever, it could be that wax lipid. Whereas if it's a larger head, maybe only 25% of that mass would be a lipid or a wax.
Well, that's like a water balloon. So if you think of a resin head as a water balloon and the wax and lipid is just the rubber, if you're blowing up a water balloon or an air balloon, the more air is in it, the less rubber is technically taking up the volume. So the more THC and terpenes that are inside that resin head swelling it out, the less of its actual fat and lipids and things like that. And the other thing is with smaller heads, I know this just from I had a really early pull one time and had a lot of short heads and small heads, and it was damn near impossible to get that shit off the stalks. So when they're short, tiny little bulbous heads versus the long glandular trichomes with a thick head, and there's even a guy called Farmhouse PDX is his Instagram page. He has what he calls weak neck phenos, where the resin head comes up to a point and then it pinches down and then the head goes out. So the heads just literally come flying off with very, very little effort. So when he's washing, he can do a very gentle, he uses a whisk tech is what he calls it, like a whisk you'd make a cake with, and just very gentle, very short washes. And he pulls basically pure white or like kind of sandy yellow hash. So I definitely think that the shape and size of the resin head do matter.
So if we think, or if you say, Tal, like we were saying, when you smoked, say, the 73 and you got the best effect, but then you smoked, say, the 120 and got a different effect. So then are we to assume that there's different cannabinoid makeup and terpene makeups and the different size heads and then I can totally understand that maybe happening, but then consistently being that way, like consistently in big heads, there's this.
Well, like,
Consistently
yeah,
in
to
small
be
heads, there's
honest,
that. I don't know if the only way we could do, I guess, would be test results on dry sift on the
I only
different.
tried the like
size.
120 Ohio once because it was just so bad. I didn't want to smoke it like you were saying, make it for edibles or something. But I'm sure there's like contaminants or like maybe even plant material that gets stuck in there. And I don't know. It just seems like every single one I ever did, the 73 or the 90 bag, is just killer. So, but yeah, some strains have bigger heads than others though too, and also with the ripeness, like Frenchie would say, that first little shake is like when it's a ripe tree. You shake the tree, all the ripest fruit's gonna drop off. Then after that, you're like you got to shake it harder, and then like the ones that are attached. So if it's a premature harvest, it might be stuck. You know, the resin glands might be a little more sticky to the plant.
Bubbleman is quoted by Sir Dirty in the chat saying 73 to 120 is usually the best depending on strain and trichome size. I've heard Sam the Skunk Man talked a bit about this. He's done a lot of dry sifting over the years, and he's had some strains that will pull like 150 full melt, 160 full melt. And I haven't seen a ton of that, but I also think it depends on the size of the plant because he grew a skunk one and he dry sifted it in a 4-inch pot. So it was like a, less than 1 foot tall plant. And then he had a 100-gallon pot in the same room, same clone, but the plant was over 10 feet tall. It was just a fucking massive plant. And he said when he did the dry sift, the larger plant made larger dry sift. So it has more time to physically develop. It makes sense to me from a physiological standpoint, but I do think that there's probably exceptions to that. Like if you found a very short, like squatty Afghani plant that has just crazy ass big resin heads, because maybe that's what its genetics are developed to do. But I think if you're working the same genetic, a larger plant is going to tend to have a little bit larger resin, would be my
light intensity
educated guess.
Because it's a taller plant. You know what I mean? Having something to do with the intensity of the light.
Could be. There's so many factors that go in. It's really fascinating.
so-
That's why it
it's
makes
so
it
hard.
really hard to study cannabis. And I think just agricultural sciences in general can be a little bit misguided at times because they think they're studying one thing and they haven't done a proper job doing the proper control. So like keeping the environment the exact same, like even just having the exact same soil mix in 2 pots. Like if you're doing a side by side, making sure it's exactly the exact same soil mix, unless you've got a good machine or somebody who can do it really well by hand and take the time, then it's difficult to, and even if you do take the time to try and do it your best, it's very difficult to get damn near 95% the same, let alone 100% the same. So there's a lot of factors and it can be very, very hard to judge. Noah, what do you think about this whole big resin, little resin situation? Do you have any preference?
Yeah, I definitely like the big heads, and I thought it was really interesting what Spartan said too. Like I know a little bit about this, and I know you want to pull the fat, the wax and the lipids and all that stuff out. And I never really put 2 and 2 together, but the smaller ones would have more, but it just totally makes sense. But I just instinctively from doing it, allegedly in the past, the fat ones will work better for me for sure.
Yeah, and I wonder if the wax really is, or how much thicker it is, as large as it's getting, because I don't know. I genuinely just don't know what the surface pressure would be, or if you could have like a thin shelled trichome head, and if that would even be desirable, because if it's too thin, it'll rupture more easily, perhaps before you're able to use it. If it's too thick, like the rind on a fruit, it might add a consistency that's not desirable, or more desirable potentially. But
I can speak directly to that because certain heads are more, well, even just like looking at terpene tests and cannabinoid profile tests. Brandon Rust sent me some of his first ever Limerilla phenos. It was still being called GG4 crossed to Black Lime Reserve in one of the tests. But 2 of the phenos I looked at, one of them stands out because it was the highest terpene test I've ever seen. It was 12% terpenes and 26% overall cannabinoids. Ridiculous. Like, and I only believe it because I've been to Brandon's grow and I see what he fucking does. The guy's an absolute beast. But the other one, same exact cross, Black Lime Reserve to GG4, was like, I want to say 34% or 32% cannabinoids and 6% terpenes. So I had double the terpenes, but less cannabinoids in the first one, and half the terpenes and higher cannabinoids in the second one. And just thinking about those two, if you looked at the resin of them under a microscope, a 12% terpene resin head, just knowing what terpenes look like, it's going to have all these little bubbles and oils inside the resin head. You can physically see them. Like if you take a jeweler's loupe or a 1000x microscope, when you're looking in there, it looks almost like Eagle Gardens has his little profile picture is like a trichome, and it almost looks like there's a skull because there's like little like almost eye shaped and like mouth shaped and nose shaped little darker areas that are terpenes inside the resin head. And so I do think even like the same exact cross can have fairly large variation within an individual trichome head or even across that whole plant, because like they don't take individual trichomes to test them. They're grinding up the plant and testing it for its percentages and things like that. But it's something I think that needs a lot more study for sure. But a lot of hash makers have been documenting macro photography, showing off resin heads, especially the dry sift people. If you look at some dry sift people, they'll show you like they're cleaned up dry sift, and you could see the actual little, it looks like caviar. It's like a bunch of tiny little balls. And the ones that zoom in even closer and closer and closer, you can start to see the different things in there. And I think that most cannabinoids are colorless, but some of them do have color, like CBN, I believe, turns red. And so it's interesting what makes the trichome look how it looks, especially when you get real up close. There's a lot of really good photographers out there. Eric Nugshots, many, many great cannabis photographers out there.
Yeah, and like I know that in other plants and also possibly cannabis to some degree, I also agree that more research should be done. There is some interesting research that I remember reading, but I cannot cite the exact name of the source. But they were talking about how maybe in past populations, different trichomes were more chemically disparate, but nowadays that's perhaps not as much the case because of hybridization. And I guess that's also certainly true for other plants where you can have different parts of the plant be different. Obviously, there's non-glandular and glandular trichomes. I was actually just talking about in a script that I'm writing about spider mites, about how defenses like just the non-glandular trichomes, just like being raised on the surface like that, kind of makes it very hostile for a small little herbivore like a spider mite, for example, to like get its mouth part close to the surface, and then also to like walk on it's kind of difficult. So I don't know. I think that's really interesting. I wonder how big a trichome can get before it basically bursts really easily.
Well, that was the one thing that I kind of forgot to mention when I was talking about the differences between cultivars was the major hash makers will tell you this one is better for dry sift than bubble hash, because if you wash it in bubble, all the terpenes get sucked out in the wash. You can smell that hash water. The reason is because there's flavonoids, terpenes, and other aromatic compounds that are being water soluble. THC, for example, is not. You don't really have to worry about the actual THC. I think Spartan's a THCA might be water soluble, but
yep, it's just they call it somewhat water soluble, whatever the fuck that means. So I don't think it transfers well into water, but it can, especially for a long time.
Okay, yeah. So with hash washing, I don't think people are, especially looking at like the results, we're getting high 60% sometimes in the THCs and cannabinoids, and a handful of terpenes, anywhere from like 1 to 10% terpenes in a lot of hash. So it's an interesting thing to think about for sure. And I think that we've definitely covered this issue quite well, and maybe we could talk a little bit about growing to actually get to the hash. Because a few weeks ago, I wanted to be on the show. I thought I might be able to make it for the Easter, Ramadan, and I think Yom Kippur maybe was that day too. There was like 3 holidays in one, but I missed it. My plan for that day was to do like ways to resurrect a plant or bring a plant back from the dead. That's kind of just like a fun little allusion to the day. And we've talked about that once in the past, and I think I titled it 6 Ways to Bring a Plant Back from the Dead because there were 6 of us on the panel. And now that there's 5 of us, we could do like 5 ways to resurrect your struggling or dying plant. And one, just because I think the YouTube SEO put that out there, and so it's like one of our most viewed videos ever. And I think a lot of people are like, oh wait, there's like, at least 6 good tips in there for resurrecting a plant. My plant's fucked up, so I need to go back and listen to that one. So not that we intentionally mess up our plants, but I know a lot of us do consulting. We work with new growers. We have been new growers ourselves at one point or another, whether that's Tao 30, 40 years ago, or, anybody in the audience who just started this very year. A lot of us, we were all new growers at one point. So it's good to kind of give some perspective from that point of view, and even experienced growers. You could just get busy in life, and the garden gets out of whack, and you might have to rescue something. So I know even like Spartan said a few months ago, he had a timer issue, and he had to put a bunch of stuff into flower and harvest a bunch of stuff that he wasn't planning on. So we can all get ourselves into a situation where we're kind of fighting from digging our way out of a hole, I guess. So I guess I'll pass it first to Tao, because I think he's got the most experience of all. And maybe you could give us one to start, a tip or trick. If you've got a struggling plant, how do you go about bringing it back to good health?
30, 40 years ago, I'll be 28 next year. Jack, what are you talking about?
I'm not including the fact that you age in reverse, but I'm just talking about the fact that you said you started in the 80s or 90s. And I can't believe that it's 30 or 40 years ago now.
It's really unique, honestly. You can forgive him for forgetting.
In any case, yeah. Recently, my newest thing has been earthworm casting seemed to fix a lot of the issues that I'm having. And obviously, if your plant's dying because you haven't watered it in a long, long time, then obviously giving it some water would help a lot. Because that's usually the time where I ever get scared, is like when either the temperature changes or I just, something happens and I can't get to them. And that's when they droop and they look like they're dead. And just giving them water, it's amazing how a totally dead looking plant will come back. But yeah, earthworm casting seemed to fix many things. And I want to give everybody else a chance because I want to use up everybody's answers. But I know
no, that's fine. Honestly, it's I think you gave a good answer there, and we have at least 5 of us on the panel tonight. Aaron, the grower, is going to be joining us about halfway in, so he could probably drop some advice on this as well. But,
yeah. I'll leave it at that then. Yeah, definitely earthworm castings. That'll be my first go-to. Either even just put it in a jug with water, mix it up, shake it up, and give it to them, or top dress it and water it in. Both seem to be good.
Out of those two, do you notice a more immediate or stronger effect from either, or are they about the same?
Well, what I do sometimes is I have a jelly strainer bag that I'll put the earthworm castings in, and I'll just I'll run water through it to a spray bottle, so I could actually foliar spray too. But you need a really good filter, and yeah, so that's what I would do with that. But I think either way is pretty good. And either way, also, even if you do the extract, shake up in the bottle and pour it on, the clumps will be on the container eventually anyway, so it stays there and it'll help further on.
And I actually have a pretty good idea of why you don't do it, but maybe for the listeners out there, could you explain why you're doing an earthworm casting extract, which is like a short wash, 30 minutes or less for the most part, I'd say 10 to 15 at the most for most people, versus like a actively aerated compost tea where you put it into a bucket and bubble it for, I don't know, 12, 24, 48 hours until you get a microbial mass going, things like that?
Well, from my understanding, there's a lot of different controversy over that one, but they could say when you make a tea, you don't really know what is multiplying greatly in there, so you really don't know what you end up with. And my theory, and I've read other tea supplies like that would have something that you could put in a compost tea brewer. They say also it's just like if you just mix it up and pour it on, where it ends up in the soil, you're going to have air pockets in there and it's going to be moist. So they're going to be able to grow in there as well if you're going for the microbial lift of the whole thing. And for the humic acid and stuff too, when you do with the earthworm casting, supposedly that's what really flies off of it easy when you do that rinse like that into the spray bottle. And even when I do it into my, to the watering can, I will do that too. I'll pour it through so that it gets some agitation and I wring it out good so it gets some juice in there. But yeah, other than that, I mean, if you want to brew it, I mean, go ahead. People I tell everyone, whatever your results is, if the plants love it, then it's probably good. If your plants are not doing well, then rethink things. Yeah.
That's always good advice there. And it's funny, I used to
I want to
be-
do the second one.
Oh, okay, I'll pass it to you next, but I just wanted to make a point on the compost tea thing. Is I used over 100 of them with great results. Is because my hydro store was giving them away for free every Wednesday and Sunday. So I'd go in there and I'd get it for free and I'd give it to my plants and they'd have good responses from it. But when I actively started making it myself at home, one, it's noisy and you're running a pump, so there's electricity increasing your costs, and there is the potential for bad bacteria and things to form and things like that. But more so than anything for me, my wife just fucking hated the sound of that fucking pump running, and it was just taking up space and inconvenience. So that was something that I avoided, and I've switched to the worm casting extract as well, and I've had great results, similar or as good as the compost tea. But I'm not one of those who like poo-poos compost tea and it's like, oh, it's terrible, it's going to kill your plants, because I've seen it only have positive results on all the plants that I've ever used it on, and a lot of people that I know use it with great success. The one advice I'd give on actively aerated compost tea, and this is from Patrick of Green Bicycles, GREAN, who's a High Times Cannabis Cup winner. He advises smell it. If it starts to smell sour, then you've probably brewed it too long, and then it's probably not going to be good for your plants. So just a general tip: if it smells sour when you've brewed anything that's compost, it's probably gone a little bit too far. But with that said, Matthew, tip number 2 for how to resurrect a plant or bring it back from the dead.
Well, I just wanted to say that up front, obviously, like what you do is going to depend on what the problem is, right? But like, aside from that, trying to find, I guess I would say, to try to find that, right? To target what this sort of issue could be. I also want to mention that the holiday I think you were referring to is Yom HaShoah, which is Holocaust Remembrance Day. So I just wanted to put that out there. It wasn't Yom Kippur, but my favorite thing to suggest to people, like kind of a step 0 thing with IPM at least, is to just kind of assess from top to bottom, like the foliage, flowers if you have them, fruit if you have them, right? In that kind of context, moving down the plant. And if you don't have like a scouting pattern or profile, everything's different for different people. Definitely depends on how many plants that you're actually growing. But I find that it's really helpful to have like a system where you take a couple of leaves from an individual and look at them at different parts of the foliage. If you suspect that you have some sort of pest problem, or you notice something interesting or sort of out of place, like maybe stippling damage or chlorosis or something like that, looking at the stem can also be helpful. Some pathogens like Fusarium I've definitely seen in this context, but there's also Sclerotinium, which is like a whitish cottony fungal growth that can happen on branches and stems. So that can happen too. And then moving down, if you can actually access the roots, I definitely recommend that people regularly do that. Obviously, rice root aphid is the thing that a lot of people think of, especially if you're bringing cuttings in, right? That's a very common vector. But it's also kind of helpful to know, if you have access to it, to see just how the roots look like. Are they getting brown often? Are they very are they rotting even? That can be really important and give you some signs that maybe an abiotic problem rather than a biotic problem is going on. Or maybe you have a biotic problem like Fusarium or Pythium or something that's taking advantage of a fundamentally abiotic issue. And
Can I just cut in for the layman out there?
Absolutely.
Abiotic versus biotic factors. Could you just give people like the 2-second rundown on what an abiotic versus biotic factor would be?
Yeah, so like a factor caused by an organism that's alive versus one that's not. And I think
as this a quick example, like you were talking about root rot, abiotic factor might be you're overwatering or something like that, or underwatering, making the roots unhealthy, versus an actual pest, which would be a biotic factor.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's really important to know kind of like how these things occur, right? Just having like some of that background knowledge you'll get as you like study, as you look things up, as you watch various people's videos and tutorials, so you had to be careful. You always want to corroborate that with some research, because sometimes people misspeak, or they just simply are talking about something that's more complex or something like that. But it's very common for like overwatering, for example, to not be targeted, but like have a pathogen that comes from the overwatering, like in your example, be targeted. Or looking at something that's totally unrelated. As you all well know, I get tons of questions on social media, specifically about pests, but also specifically about predatory mites and springtails and mold mites and things like that, which are generally not really a problem, although there are certain cases where they are. And so like just misdiagnosing things is very common. And I guess this is a great situation to just have people and implore people to be more conscientious of that. Learn your pests, learn your common problems, and don't think that you're immune to them, no matter what your experience level is, because the strongest swimmers most often drown.
That's a great quote, and it's so true. But people don't like to acknowledge that, because when you've been doing something for a long time, it feels like you could get comfortable, and you don't have to worry about X or Y or Z, especially if you haven't faced it before. But that first time is going to be brutal if you're not at least a little bit prepared. I like to have things on hand for pests that are likely and expected, instead of having to go out and buy it. For example, like some people, if you don't have a gardening store or something nearby, it might be 2 or 3 days until you can get the proper product to apply. So in that 2 or 3 day period, you might have quite the infestation, versus if you just had that product. Like I know Spartan Grown over there has got wettable sulfur just waiting, and if he needs it, he's going to hit something with it. And they're not waiting a day, they're not waiting 2 days, they're getting it right now as soon as he whips it up and he starts spraying it on. So that's a good tool to have in your tool belt, so to speak. And I think with that said, I could pass it over to Spartan Grown, and maybe you could share a tip on how to get your plants back to good health or resurrect them from the dead.
Okay, I'm going to share a couple. One, because Tao took mine, so I'm going to share it anyway. But earthworm castings is my go-to number one thing I do. First thing I do if I suspect some kind of a nutrient issue, if the plant's not happy, anything outside of pest issues, I'm going earthworm castings. And the way I do it is I usually will do a top dress of, so if I'm in pots, basically in all my containers, I'll do about a 1/2 inch. So it's fairly thick of earthworm castings, a whole layer. And then I water it in so that it's sopping, and the water will just sit there and be like an earthworm, like what Tao kind of described, except for I do that on my pot. And I let it soak in good. I make sure that the pot is dry for, not super dry, but enough so that I'm not overwatering. And that usually 8 out of 10 times will fix whatever was going on. It might take 3 or 4 days, but it usually fixes the problem. And then my other one was going to be, so that was an organic situation. And in a synthetic situation, it's simply flush. Don't be afraid to flush your media in a synthetic situation, if that's an option, especially like coco, things like that, because you just reset the media, man. Just fucking mix up a nutrient of what you want the fucking media to be and flush it through until the output is the same as the input, or fucking close, or at least.
So the answer is not always more CalMag when you're in.
No, it's just replace.
Not always.
I mean, that's the easiest thing to do in like a home situation. You have 1 or 2 pots, man, you can do that pretty easily. Just, flush it with straight water if you want to, right from the get-go, to flush out what's in there, and then come back in with some nutrient that is mixed correct. Make sure your meters are all, calibrated and everything, and mix up a correct nutrient solution and put it in there. And that 8 out of 10 times will fix your problem too.
That's a great tip for hydro for sure. I know most of the new growers and just even experienced growers I work with that ask for help online, if I ask them, what's your runoff? Most of them are going to say, I don't know. If they can tell me, that's a good sign, but it's usually high. So I'll say, what's your runoff EC? I like to work in EC because, as Dr. MJ has mentioned many times, there's like 3 different ppm scales. And depending on which one you give, like a 500 is like equivalent to 1,000 in one of them. So that just shows you like ppm is all over the place. So in EC, like if we're using like the there's microsiemens and millisiemens. I like to go by like the 1.5 or 1.2 as opposed to like, 1,000 microsiemens or whatever it is. So I think most people will be fine with their lighting and environment at around or below 1.6 EC. 1.5 is probably going to be fine. I see very little reason to be going over 2 EC, like Spartan was just talking about on like giving it a flush. So if your number that you're looking at, if you've even measured it, is above 2 and your plants are struggling, I think that is likely why. There's probably lockout. You have too many nutrients, not too few. And when there's too many, they are actual like salts. And when that water goes away, that salt locks up those roots and it makes it harder. I'm oversimplifying a bit, but it makes it harder for the plant to uptake not only nutrients, but also water. So they're literally, even if they're sitting in a soaked medium of cocoa, if it's soaked in really, really salty water, it's gonna be hard for them to uptake any water to drink and survive. So great advice there, Spartan. And I think the next up will be Noah the Grower.
Yeah, that was the one I was going to say. And then I'll just say this. So if you're growing in like soil and you're doing an organic base with a little bit of salts, you can flush, you can do that. But another thing you can do is just give it water only. So if you're used to giving your plants like a 5-gallon bucket, you're used to giving it like a third to half a gallon, just give it the same normal amount of water. And if you can even do that like twice in a row. And if your plants are on like a schedule where it's like you're going to water them every couple days, another thing I'll do is I'll just give it a little bit of water the first day, just straight water. Then I'll do it again and I'll give it a little bit more water. And then another thing you can do is if you're being lazy, like some growers might do, you make sure that like your utensils you're using to like measure your nutrients, like the cup, the shot glass thing, or the little syringe thing you got, clean those. That usually can help. Sometimes if you look inside the nutrient bottle, it'll build up. There can be like a filmy buildup that if you're not shaking it up, there can also be mold in there if your bottle's been sitting around. A couple things that I like to look for, the problems that I've run into before.
That's a good one. I've ran into that before too myself, and that's not something that you hear a lot. Inside those bottles, take a look inside them because sometimes you get surprised.
Well, and some of them,
even ones that aren't that old, you're like, what is going on here?
They might have been sitting on a shelf for years. That's what people don't think about is they're not brand new when they get to you. They might be have been sitting there or behind, like 3 in front of them that got bought earlier, and that was the very last one from the shipment that they got 2 years ago or whatever it is. So some nutrients don't go bad in time, like if you keep shaking them and you don't contaminate it. I think a lot of people make the mistake of, you mentioned this as well, Noah, that your utensils, if they're not clean, you can be causing cross contaminations that you might think are minor, but there's a reason there's an A and there's a B. You can't have the A in the B because if you do, they don't store well together. It starts to make things like either solidify or they have reactions in the solution that'll mess with the pH. They can even just change the entire NER or chemical constituent that you're trying to give the plant. So you think you're giving it CalMag and nitrogen or whatever, but really there's a bunch of phosphorus in there because you've been using a really heavy phosphorus, laden dropper. And if you do that once, twice, or whatever, you might think, oh, it's nothing. But over a year or 2 years, you've done it once every day, and it's 365 times a year. So like after 3 years, you've done it 1,000 times if you've got a big bottle, and that's really going to change that solution up. So good advice there. Way to get around that easily is if you just have a cup of like tap water or something, you can syringe up the solution and then squeeze it out and get most of the remnants and drops out of your droppers if you use those, or syringes, whatever it is. So cross contamination is definitely a big problem. One thing I would say is how to bring a plant back from the dead is, I think foliar feeding is something that really can quickly get something to the plant. I used to use one called Heavy 16. I think it's just called foliar. And they claim that there was like dichotomous plant tissue in there. But if you look at the MSDS, it's like potassium and a few other things in there. But even like earthworm casting extract, I've noticed that has some great results. Back when I used compost tea, I would use it inside and outside, even though sometimes it wouldn't smell the best. It didn't smell terrible, but I mean, it's compost, so it might not be the best smelling thing if you're spraying it inside a home garden. That's something to consider. Outdoors, it's very effective. And I've heard people even claim like with compost teas that they knock down a lot of molds and mildews and things like that. So Matthew, I'm curious what your thoughts might be if somebody was using like maybe not just compost teas, but good microbial foliars. What are the chances that that's going to benefit them or prevent maybe potential issues with pathogens like molds and mildews?
with microbial foliars, just generally.
I mean, like is that a possibility? That's something within your wheelhouse that you've seen the data to support, or that's totally out of the realm of would you call that bro science, or there might be something to it?
I just want to make sure I understand that certain microbial applications will affect other microbials.
Essentially, yeah. So it's not I'm
Yeah.
asking from the gardener's perspective. I could say it would not be a waste of time if somebody were to go through the process of deliberately applying foliar applications of, in this case, we'll even say specific microbials. And I think that I know the answer to this
I know
because we've talked
someone-
about
Yeah.
Bavaria bassiana in the past.
They
Yeah,
turn
things
into-
can
Yeah.
affect each other for sure. I would say so. Absolutely. I think that I'm very partial to the idea of like producing kind of like a, I've had different names for this kind of a thing that I've invented myself, but I'm sure are related to other things people have said way before I was born. Kind of like a biobarrier, sort of a concept where you can because the surface of the plant is actually kind of hostile to a lot of organisms in an agnostic way, by which I mean that like the plant doesn't necessarily know what's going to be on its surface. Like if like a quote unquote beneficial organism gets trapped in a trichome, that's unfortunate, but like it also could have killed something that was going to be nefarious, right? So there's a lot of these sort of defenses. And so, like, yeah, if you apply something to the foliage, some organisms, some microbes are going to be able to reside there longer than others. And I think this is a case where, like, there's a lot of dynamics that are really hard to track come into play, especially from like a home grow situation, right? Or just any kind of field situation. You'd have to somehow like test after the application to know, what the case is. But like ostensibly, yeah, some organisms can like reside on the foliage, especially if they're shaded, if they don't have a lot of direct, especially like UV radiation from like sunlight occurs to me as being a pretty limiting factor. But there are various organisms all the time. Like you could go take samples, and there are ecologists do this all the time. They just take foliage and they're able to distinguish the microbes that are on the leaves versus those that are in the leaves, and that kind of a thing. And also the same for the soil, for that matter, as well. And I think it's really important to like not assume that everything's going to work together perfectly. Some things just might not synergize at all, but they still have benefits. Other things might synergize and be way more than the sum of their parts. And other things might antagonize each other. And I think that that's like probably the number one thing that I think people like. Biodiversity is good, but like obviously with the caveat that like some things can switch from being a beneficial to a parasite, right? And other things might be a problem, and you don't know that it's there in the first place. So that's what I have to say about that.
Like a good example though, Jack, that I know here in Michigan that they do is some of the orchards, like the apples, things like that. They'll have compost. They'll actually, what's his name? Dr. Wiggler, I think his name is here in Michigan. He raises worms, and
Oh yeah, I've bought his stuff.
Okay, and he'll actually take worm castings on site to the orchard and then brew the tea there and then apply it as a spray, like fresh right then onto the orchards. And then they get the whole foliar application. He said they don't have to spray anything else for the rest of the year. So they don't have to do, I assume they were spraying pesticides, but I don't know what they were spraying on their trees. But when I had that conversation, I thought that was cool.
I've heard similar experiences with like vegetable growers here in Southern California using compost teas and even like flowers like roses and things like that, applying them and having good results and not needing to use as many or any pesticides, which depending on what they're battling is pretty impressive. And that's why I wanted to kind of get an idea of, is this hokey pokey, like anecdotal claims, and maybe they're just in a great environment so they're not dealing with the stuff, or are there actually substantiations behind these things? I was trying to figure out what the I use Terravesco feed the soil worm castings, and they do testing every 2 months or whatever, and they have the exact same two main microbes. And I wanted to list off what those microbes were, but the photo that I'm looking at right now is a little bit blurry, so I might have to walk over into the other room and actually grab my worm castings and
All
read
right,
it out
I'll
to you
fill
guys.
in for you a second because I want to mention Brandon Rust uses his Micro Plus to until I think he said the second week in flower to, keep his plants from getting mold or powdery mildew, I believe. And while I got the mic, I want to shout out Chat, who Weed Never Killed Kenny mentioned labs as a spray seems to perk up his plants that aren't happy. And Smart Poker mentioned reduce the light intensity, which I have found, especially when switching from like one area to another with the high-powered LEDs now, they could really do a number on a plant that's used to low light. So that's probably not a bad idea either.
Another good one that has been brought up a couple times in chat now was to up pot your plant too, especially in organic situations. Usually,
Yeah,
a lot of times if
I
you're in a
meant to
small
say
pot-
that I'm transplanting right now. I meant to say that.
Yeah.
That's funny, man. I saw that earlier and I wanted to bring that up and I totally forgot too, because if you're in like a solo cup, for example, or even if you're in a 1 gallon pot, like a hard plastic pot, if a plant's root bound and it's running out of nutrients, you're in organics, giving it a little bit more new shoes or more root space, whatever you want to say. Look at Noah the Grower over here in the middle of, like you said, he's actually doing it. But yeah, that'll definitely help a plant that's struggling if it
that's probably the
is for
best
those reasons.
advice. Yeah, if it is in a bigger plant in a smaller.
On the opposite end, be careful to not transplant too early, because if you have a tiny little plant or into too large of a pot, like if you're going from a solo cup, I wouldn't go into anything. Typically, I only go into like a 1 gallon or a 2 gallon personally, but I wouldn't go into anything bigger than a 5. I see some people go from like a solo cup to like a 10 gallon pot. I'm just like, I don't think that's gonna colonize that whole pot as well as if you would step it up. So like you go from like 1 to 3 to 5 or something like that, or 1, 5, 7 type thing. Working your way up in pots, the plant can fill out the pot that it's in and then go into the next pot with a larger root ball that it would have otherwise. Then like you don't just start a seed in a massive pot for a reason. So I think transplanting actually, like Dr. MJ has mentioned in the past, if you do it properly, will increase the speed of your plant growth and overall, and I believe increase yields and things like that as well.
The light intensity one, that's a good one too. And I didn't even think about it till it was mentioned, but I just switched my bulbs out like a month ago, and right afterwards I kind of was like, wow, I wonder why I noticed it too. So that's a good one for sure.
Yeah, too much. Like I think Spartan said, just like dial the lights back a little bit, raise the light up if you can't, dim it down. If you're cranking them super high and you know that, and they're starting to like, I don't know, just kind of get like a light green fade or starting to yellow, or you're seeing that curling up towards the light or like curling down away from the light, and everything else seems to be dialed in, like the watering is all good and all that stuff. One big piece of advice I have for organic growers, I literally just gave this in the DMs a few days ago, maybe yesterday, was to err on the side of maybe underwatering, on the fact that like not how much you're watering at a time, but how often you're watering. You don't need to water every single day in organic soil. You probably don't need to water every other day. Every 3 days might be fine for some of your plants, but it might not be fine for all of your plants. So if you have one that's big and vigorous and growing really rapidly, it might need water every 3 days. But if you have a runt in the same room and it's half the size of that big one, don't just think, oh, it's time to water this one, so I'm going to water all of them. It's convenient and might make you feel better. Like, all right, I got all my watering done. But the plants aren't going to be happy. I personally am a believer. They all take things at a little bit different rate. You can kind of get it close to dialed in, or if like your room is really cranking and you're running all the same strain, maybe they'll all want it at the same time. But especially if you're popping seeds or like running autos like this individual was, you see different plants, they're taking water at different rates. And if you're just trying to force your way onto the plant, they're not going to be as happy as when you kind of listen to them. And one of the first easy signs that you're overwatering, do you have fungus gnats? Because a lot of people do. And oftentimes it's just simply overwatering can make the environment beneficial for a fungus gnat to thrive. And just having a proper mulch layer can help prevent that, but also just giving an extra day. Reach your finger down into that soil. It might feel dry on that very top little crust, but if you get your finger down and knuckle in and there's still a good amount of water, I don't think that you need water. So lift the pot too. You'll kind of get the idea of like, this feels a little bit light. And even the last bit of advice I'll give on that is, if you see your leaves are like this, or like kind of like this, how you see in my logo behind me, I think you're fine. But as soon as they start getting to that 45-degree negative or even lower, like Tao talked about, where it looks like a plant's like literally like folded in on itself about to die, then it needs some water. So go ahead and give it some water at that point. But most of you guys out there, and I know this because all the DMs I get, are overwatering. in organic soil. If you're in cocoa, completely disregard that, because you can water pretty much every single day, twice a day, 3 times a day, 5 times a day, and you're gonna be fine.
It's usually the opposite. People are underwatering in cocoa usually.
Yeah. So in cocoa, the opposite advice would be make sure that you're checking your EC on your runoff. I would say at least once a day to get an idea of where you're at. But if you can, check it every single time. If you're giving feed in, you want to know what's coming out. Because if you put in a 1500 and then 2200 comes out, it's like, whoa, that's way higher than I was expecting. But if you put in 1500 and 1600 comes out, then you're okay.
That's another thing. Something should be coming out. That's another thing. A lot of people are missing. They're not watering to runoff when they're in cocoa.
That's a good point. And like, we're not talking runoff like the first drop of water that you see. If you water a gallon, you want maybe 5 to 10% runoff, depending on your environment and how large your pots are and things like that, how much you can afford to have waste. But I'd say at least 5%. So if it's 500 milliliters, then at least 50 milliliters of runoff. That's 10%, but 25. But something, like, have an idea roughly of what to expect, because in soils, on the other hand, like going back to soil, sometimes when you water, especially with peat, because it has a tendency to get hydrophobic, you'll water it and the water will go straight through the whole pot and then it'll start shooting out the sides. And like, you're like, oh, okay, I must be done. You really want to kind of slowly, evenly pour the water throughout the medium and give it the best chance. And even maybe use a wetting agent, like a yucca, to allow the water to be wetter and more thoroughly saturate the medium.
There's a question in chat that somebody asked me and I don't have an answer. Maybe you guys can help me because I'm not a rosin presser, but they want to know what's a good return if you're flour pressing 10 grams. So 10 grams of flour, what would be a good return?
2 grams to 3 grams.
2 to 3 grams. Okay.
3 grams is insane. 2 grams is good. Anything below 2 is you're probably not going to want to run that cultivar again. Most cultivars are going to be able to hit at least 20% return. Really, really good ones will hit 30%. It also depends on how dry you're getting your flour. Like if you get it uber dry, it's probably not going to return as well. Bubbleman has suggested using and I don't love these for long-term storage of flour, but if you know you're pressing it, using the Bovita, Integra, or whatever humidity pack to get your bud up to 62%. He's done side-by-side tests with the same flour, and the one that was at 62% returned better. I think there's something about like maybe sublimation or steam that's happening when you're squeezing the bud. That moisture is actually pushing out. So let's say there's 10% moisture in one bud and 5 in the other. You've got 5% more water, and that 5% extra steam or whatever it is helps.
Pressure at least.
Yeah, it's causing pressure and it's getting squeezed out, and then that'll evaporate with the heat and pressure. But what you're left with is more good quality rosin from all the experts out there that do it. I don't have a press myself. I've had the pleasure of pressing a couple times. It's really fun and awesome. But I also hear people. Numbers are a big thing in cannabis, right? People love to talk about their yields and how much they're yielding with a light or how much rosin they get off. The other thing, like it's a much lower number you'll hear, is like bubble hash returns. Like, what do you get from your fresh frozen return? Some people, it's like 1 to 5%. So like they wash 1,000 grams and they get 10 back or something like that. And it's just kind of scary to think that you could put 1,000 grams in and get 10 back. That's why they're charging over $100 a gram some places, right? But anybody else have thoughts on the rosin pressing question?
I guess that's
It's not my forte.
The chat is
Well,
commenting.
it's very
saying,
stream dependent,
Yeah.
But you brought that up, but it's very stream dependent. And then it's, what I mean? Like, how good is the run? I mean, everybody's, if you've grown a plant 10 times, every single run's not going to be exactly the same. I don't care what anybody says. It doesn't matter if you keep doing the same thing. Still farming, things happen. So really good run, really good strain, you definitely 30%, that's good. 20% is good. Just depends on what you got, and you learn from what when you've done it more times. So
yeah, but 20% would say was average then. You guys agree on that?
I'd say that's about average. That's what I'm hearing. A lot of people are like, I wouldn't be impressed if somebody's like, I got this 20%, but I wouldn't be pissed.
Well,
either.
I didn't know if it made a difference that it was flour over if you would press, say, for example, like hashes was usually pressed.
So that you're going to get a lot higher return because
I imagine
it's 90% of the way there, right? You're pressing it through like a 120 bag or 20. It depends. Everybody's got different techniques or whatever, but you're just getting the final little impurities out. I actually don't even know what people expect. Maybe like 80 or 90% returns back on something like that. Cause like I said, hash is already smokable. I don't turn hash into rosin. I actually prefer the hash because you can use it on a bowl topper. You can roll it up between your fingers and put it into a joint. Rosin.
Eagle was saying that last night. It's like, once you get that bubble hash, like, really, do you really have to even do more? But you know, some people are snobs, and like,
I'm wondering
once they do that,
people are gonna dry sift and then press the dry sift.
I've done that. That's
Right,
the one
right.
of the things I've pressed is it, and I clean the dry sift. We did the static tech.
What's the lowest temp you could press the dry sift? Because it's going to kill the terps during that, doesn't it?
Well, they're
Washing
kind
the
of
water kills terps too, man. That's not stopping anybody.
yeah, but he's saying why
Right,
wouldn't you
right,
just
but-
keep the sift instead of pressing it? Because when
Yeah.
you press it, you're gonna lose some to the heat. It's for the
The removal of
0.1% impurity. Like if you're not gonna, what I realized when we static teched it, there was very little difference. It just changed the consistency. So you got like a goo versus like a grainy sand, right? But when you press it, some people press onto like cold plates to try and preserve as much as possible. So like they'll have like a marble or something, like a very cold, like they'll put something in the freezer. So when it comes out of those hot plates onto that paper, it hits something really cold and it starts to solidify and preserve as much of the terpene as possible. So there's some really cool techniques going on with the pressing. I even sent one to the group where there was like a triple stack. This dude had like 3 rosin presses on top of each other, and then it turns to the side with like it's on a fixed jack. So they just load it, put 3 in, it crunches all 3 of them, and then like turns it to the side and it just dumps it.
I love that.
Amazing. I mean,
Makes
the
sense.
productivity, that's a way to help bring the cost down, hopefully, right? If they can press more faster. And
it's like when somebody told me about the bottle tech where they have a circle press and then the press is circle instead of the big rectangles, and then they have like the bags that look like you'd fill quarters in it or something, so they're circular too. So you load it up and then you press it down on the press and it just goes off every which way, and it's not on the heat for any length of time really. I like that's really cool. I like that too.
It's smart. And I think it allows more pressure the way that they load it up on that bag when it presses down. Like it just, I think people get good returns with that versus like, I think when I first saw it, people were doing like a pre-press and like a rectangular like steel thing, and they press down on it and they get this kind of like little puck, and they just take that puck and they'd slide it into the little sheet and they press that thing. But now, like you're saying, they're kind of loading it into like a quarter kind of bag, and then that bag gets like squished down into, it's like a jiffy pellet almost. Like it gets crunched up and
it looks just like that. You're right.
It ends up going off all the sides. And for anybody out there who's wondering, can I use my flower rosin after I've pressed it? The answer is yes. Spartan Grown has used it to make RSO with. I know people that just eat them. It's kind of like a flaky little chip at the end, and it kind of has like a decarbed, like burnt popcorn taste a little bit to it. Some people actually enjoy it. They like eat the hell out of those things, but I think I would go with Spartan's approach based on, I think you said you got some actually pretty crazy returns off of washing some.
It just dumped like crazy. It was ridiculous to returns off of that. And it was really, I imagine it was because of maybe CBN or something, but it was really narcotic, more so than normal. It was like super sleepy stuff. So, which is great medicine.
I love that. I mean, I actually just for the first time ordered from Happy Buds hemp to get some pure CBN to mix in, but I try to make my RSO high CBN. And I know the man who just entered the call, Aaron the grower, gave me and Lady Greenstock some CBN when we visit him for our honeymoon a couple years ago. He is just getting in now. So Aaron, I don't know if you can hear us. We're talking a little bit about RSO and CBN using the pressed pucks from making rosin to turn that into RSO. But just want to say cheers and welcome to you. Let the people know where they can find you.
Word. Yeah, I love that technique. You know, using every little bit of what you have. That's the way to go, man. Start to finish. That's the definition of sustainability right there. I'm Aaron the Grower, atgacres.com and atgacres on Instagram. And I'm just happy to be here. Just finished up some dinner and smoking a bowl, and happy to see you guys.
We're happy to have you back always. I think we might actually want to not see you because I think you were turning a little roboto there, and I think your connection might do better if you just go audio. Because I saw, I'm seeing you again move now, but it was frozen there for most of what you were talking, and thankfully it came through clear despite like kind of being a little bit chopped up.
All right, how is it now? Sorry about that.
Much better.
Much better. Clear, okay. Very, very serviceable for the show. That being said, I've got a train blowing by in the background, so nothing's perfect, right?
Good to hear you, ETG.
Yeah, Tal, thanks for showing up, man. I had a good time with Eagle last night.
It was a great show.
Yeah.
And we were talking a little bit earlier about Tao started off the show. We were talking about hash. Would you rather have a plant that yields an ounce? That both plants yield an ounce of resin, but one of them has big heads and one of them has smaller heads. So I'm curious, kind of like what your thought would be on that, because we all kind of shared some thoughts, and then maybe after that we'll talk a little bit about how to bring a plant back from the dead, because
And the ratio is the same of the compounds.
Yeah. So
Okay.
Tao's hypothetical was basically you're getting the same thing, but it's split up different in a physical. So you
But
get the
when
same
you-
cannabinoids, but it's 1
Yeah.
ounce of like tiny heads versus a bunch of tiny heads versus an ounce of larger fat heads.
Are you talking about in a concentrate or in flour that you have an ounce of?
We'll say concentrate. Like, let's say you took an ounce of both plant, or you took a pound of both plants and you yielded an ounce of dry sift.
Gotcha. Dry sift, definitely probably gonna have to say big heads to make, bigger chance of catching everything that way. And then, because once you're pressing it into rosin, or once you're altering its physical state in any way, then the size of the heads don't matter.
That's a really good point, because we didn't even mention that earlier, right? But I think we were definitely kind of talking about just like the ins and outs of like, does a bigger head have less lipids and waxes? Like if you're going to go and smoke the dry sift right away versus pressing it, that might make a difference. And I was thinking also like the larger heads might fall off easier for working it. And we all kind of spitballed a bunch of, I think, good ideas on that topic. So if you want to re-listen to that, you can. But the other question that I
That's
thought
cool.
was,
Bummer I missed that. Yeah, I love that.
oh, it's all good, man. We're happy to have you here whenever you can make it. I know you're working your ass off over there. The setup that you put in was a ton of work. I'm glad that you're able to even now that you've got things set up, spend an hour or two with us on these weeks, and you're doing killer over there, man. I'm loving what I'm seeing. The lights look great. The plants look great. It's clean. Love seeing the daughter run around, you and the wife working, and it looks like you're happy and having fun and thriving over there.
Thanks, brother. Yeah, we are. That's for sure. And apologize if there's still a lag. I can tell that sometimes there's probably some robotic shit going on. So I'll mute myself just in case. And I'll just holler at me if you have a question.
You're all good. And the other follow-up question, I guess, would be, we all kind of went around and shared some thoughts on how to resurrect a plant or bring a plant back from the dead, or just how to make an unhealthy plant healthy again. So what would your thoughts be there?
Oh, you got the worst position. Everybody already said everything, man.
But he doesn't know.
It's
So it's going to be
okay.
funny because
That's
he's going to be like, oh, I'll say exactly what so-and-so said.
Well, I wish I would have been watching. Then I would have been privy and on point. But no, I'm probably going to be just totally out of left field or something. But microbes are important. Balancing nutrition is important. Those are two of the things. Two
No.
Like it's coming through a maple
Okay.
tap.
And
Oh, man.
it's with
It was so
microbes or
good to
something.
start.
I don't know if you guys. Oh shit! Am I being robotic?
Yeah.
Fuck.
It was
Fuck
right at the
Fuck
beginning of
All
the
right,
answer.
Tell you
too.
later.
All right.
Well, I can definitely agree with the microbe comment. We definitely got that part. The balancing nutrition definitely got that part.
Oh fuck.
both great bits of advice there.
I'll just gonna sit here and watch you guys and smoke a bowl. How about that?
But in the chat so people can know. We appreciate your input, Aaron. Obviously, you have quite a bit more of it after your excursion, so we can all benefit from
I
that.
really wanted him to chat it up because I was going to ask him, for the benefit of those who didn't see Eagle's show last night. He told the tale of he brought his dirt from California to Oklahoma with him because it was that valuable to him. And I just thought that was an awesome tale. At the risk of trailers and trucks and cars, it was excellent.
Dude, we destroyed
Steve.
everything we owned to get that soil across the country. Yeah.
Wow.
Me, my old man and my wife, everything that we own, just because it weighs so much.
That's amazing.
Mhm.
and insulting to Oklahomans. No, I'm kidding. But
Yeah, but he's got a fucking ecosystem with a microbe system that probably nobody else around him has.
He's the only one who can claim that terroir. That's for damn
Yep.
sure.
that's for
Terroir,
sure,
baby. Yeah.
Well, soil from California, uh, you know, but an Oklahoman sun and wind, right? So it's a nice fusion.
Well, he's
Yeah.
got
Well,
an
it's
indoor crop going,
it's
so it's
all
not technically
inside right
terroir.
now.
Oh, right,
Yeah.
right.
but
With,
yeah, so kind of like terroir, and it it's got a taste of terroir, but it's mostly a
and where-
laboratory in there.
where's your original terroir, if you don't mind, Aaron?
Like, where am I from?
Yeah.
I'm from Florida originally.
All right.
I
With
moved.
the Florida love. It's a combination of across America. You got to love it.
Yeah, dude, I've been all over the place. I've been everywhere.
No, but most recently California, right?
Yep, California for 10 years, and Florida before that.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll just say like the Emerald Triangle generally, or do you feel comfortable?
It's-
They still have the property up there, so I don't want you to like necessarily reveal
Yeah.
exactly where.
Yeah, we still have the property in the family, so it's El Dorado County. I can say that.
Cool. Yeah, it's way up there. I can tell you that coming from San Diego, it's not a short drive, but it was
Mhm.
worthwhile for sure. I know Kyle even made it out there, but we lost him earlier in the show. I don't know what happened. Maybe he had to jump out at the hour mark, but yeah, he was able to visit Aaron before he went to Oklahoma as well. So that was cool to see.
I feel like I've seen a lot of y'all from the show in person, and I'm very lucky that I've been able to kind of travel, and y'all have been able to travel to me. It's really cool.
I can't wait to do some more of it. And I guess I'll tease again, planning in October. Hopefully it might be more like at an Airbnb than at a hotel, because when I looked at the cost, I just wouldn't want to make the ticket cost astronomical. And if we're going to rent out a hotel or even like a, whatever it's called, event room type thing, it gets expensive real quick. So I'm thinking probably rent a private Airbnb for the Cheap Home Grow meetup in Vegas in October for anybody who is interested in that. And I probably got to nail that down sooner than later, because I know travel is not cheap. I just canceled my 4th of July plans because the flights right now are ridiculous. So
Oh, wow.
it's very expensive to fly, and hopefully it's better by October, but I'm not super optimistic that that's going to be the case. And I want to be realistic that this is the Cheap Home Grow, and I'm not going to be asking people to spend thousands of dollars to come to a 1 or 2 day event unless that's something that they feel extremely obligated to do. I'm going to be able to drive because I'm in San Diego and it's not a far trip to Vegas. So, but that being said, I know a lot of you guys are on the East Coast or Michigan and all around. So I want to, like I said, try and give as much notice as possible. But I think the first one will be a relatively small event. But once I nail some more things down, I'll start posting it up and get some interest, RSVPs and things like that, and give you guys an idea of what maybe like ticket costs would be like and where it's going to be exactly and all that good stuff. So it's something I want to make happen this year. It seems like we're finally at a place where traveling is easy enough for most people. And other than the expense, the actual pandemic kind of winding down, it seems like even here in California, a lot of the stuff's kind of wound down. So I think it'd be great to have a public event. I think it's something that our community needs. We have such a great set of people online. We've all talked to each other for years now, and it's cool when we can actually meet up in person. And I look forward to that day for sure. And I'm going to do everything within my power to make sure that event is done and done well.
I mean, I can empathize with that for sure. I had to cancel Fishmas this year, opening trout up in the north, and part of that was just because of like gas prices being expensive, and also I wanted to work a little bit on my car before I went up there, to be honest. So yeah, definitely things are, I think, getting a little bit better logistically though. I'll do it next year.
It is a bummer when we have to push these things off, but I say there's always next year, but I also try to think like, if you have something you really want to do in life, do it right now, because
Dude,
never
hold
know.
on a second. This is the first time I'm hearing about this gathering, and I feel like there's way too little hype around this right now. Like, I'm fucking fired up. How are y'all not fired? We're going to Vegas in October. Fuck yeah, dude. Is that happening?
Let's
for real?
go.
That's happening for real, dude.
go.
I'll be there if no one else is. Fuck me and Lady Greenstock will be blowing down at an Airbnb in Vegas, having a good old time. So we're gonna put the dates and times and locations out there as soon as possible. Like I said, I just wanted to look into it more. When I looked into it, there are cannabis friendly hotels. So in the future, if we have like 100 people that want to show up or 200 people that want to show up, we could rent out a whole fucking hotel and throw the hell down and have a good time. I'm thinking realistically, if we get 15 to 30 people there, I'd be really happy. That's like
Now accepting sponsors.
there we go. I mean, if it was something legitimate, I would be open to something like something in the community. Like, I don't know if it would be like a Bio 365 soil or something, like no other grower uses them. And I know a lot of people that use them and they're legit, or some product that we could actually stand behind. I'd be open to something like that. Even like a non-cannabis sponsor, some sort of a venue or event plan type thing that if they want our business, we'd be happy to provide it to them as long as they are actually cannabis friendly. You know, that's the beauty of an Airbnb and a private event. If you have a private house, you don't need permits, you don't need event, all that shit. Like you should get them, and I will look into doing it the legitimate way. But I think that you're, especially in Las Vegas, going to be kind of given a little bit of leeway. There are parties there all the time. I'll say that. So as a cannabis party, it's not like we're going to be like the loudest or the rowdiest in that city. So I really look forward to it. And like I said, Aaron, I'm glad that you're hyped for it. And I want to just keep kind of reminding people that this is in the plans because we do have to get travel accommodations. And I know people at work, you have to take time off for work and things like that. So it would be a great time, even if it was just like the panel. Like if I could get all 8 or 9 people to get out there, that would be pretty awesome. And I'm hearing maybe potentially rumblings of a sponsor that might be very directly linked within our community. They've helped out other people in this community in different ways. And I think that they actually offered to sponsor me personally already. So I said no because I don't have the space for their particular product, but I know somebody on this panel who's using their product and is seemingly to have good results. So I won't say that one just yet, but I will keep that in mind. So thank you to Spartan Grown, who just gave me a good idea. And I think we've got about 45 minutes left. So I'm curious if you guys have any topics or anything that you want to get to. I'm just happy to be back. It's always great to chill with you guys, hang out, and do my hosting duties. But I talked about the few things that I wanted to talk about so far this week. So maybe we could do some chat Q&A, or maybe you guys could bring up some additional thoughts or topics that you'd like to get to.
I had that lighting advertisement. If you wanted to go over that, that was interesting. But I want to do that. I might save that for when Dr. Coco is on.
Yeah, we have to have Dr. Coco here for that.
Yeah, for sure. This is
he is our resident lighting expert for sure, and I appreciate that. We will wait until he's here to discuss those matters.
I think
drop a little teaser for people.
I can't wait.
That's a good idea, Aaron. Yeah, let me go find it. I'll share the screen.
It's long story short. It's just
Light Wars your plants for you.
Yeah, it's a lighting.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a lighting company that's claiming a lot of amazing good claims.
That was a fun one. I saw that in our little group chat.
I think it was. I think this one was the one with the grounding thing.
It was that one.
It was
and the
vibrations,
the Schumann frequency.
Yeah,
frequencies.
Man. Yeah, it was the free.
Forget about that. That's vital.
Yeah, I know you've been trying that, Ty. Have you noticed any difference?
No. Let's do a quick no with I had the music in there for a while, but then my one device died, so the speaker died, so it wasn't as easy to just turn it on and leave it going. But
did you see that study about the music? The one I read, it was like the music was so fucking loud that I'm still convinced it's the vibrations.
Right, the vibrations and I've seen a couple, like we were talking about it on the other I think it was this show, a different episode, but it's actually a vibrating trellis net kind of thing that the Pilgar Farms is using it, and you could pump in whatever music you want into it and it just vibrates, but it's a trellis or a scrog if you want it, you use it as that.
I showed it.
That's interesting. It's the net specifically, huh?
Yeah, it's actually metal, but it vibrates, and you use it as like a trellis net or a scrog net. Yep.
That's interesting.
The one I saw wasn't metal. It was a regular scrog, but it's attached to like a device that kind of rocks it, and you can rock it at like
Okay.
different speeds. And this dude always seems to have water on his plants, even like in flower, but doesn't seem to have lots of mold from the photos that I'm seeing. But like I'm always kind of surprised when I see it because um, you see a plant in flower indoors, especially like if it's outdoor and it rains, that's one thing. But if it's indoor and you're foliar feeding past like week 4 of flower or just spraying water on them, I was like, what the heck is going on here? I'm gonna try and find that
Yeah, that's
vibration
Mother
scrog.
Nature does that to me all the damn time when I try to grow outdoors. They fucking,
Yeah.
oh, you're in week 6 of flower. That's okay. Rainstorm.
For 4 days straight.
Yeah, or hail. Even worse, got there with hail.
We haven't seen that. They always say that around here on the radio. Chance of hail. It never hailed. It hailed in my lifetime on Long Island like 3 times that I can like real hail. There's been freezing rain, which is like nothing, you know. But real hail, like maybe twice or 3 times. But they say it all the time on the radio. Like chance
We get a decent enough, but it's
Thank
usually
God.
small. It's usually
Yeah.
small, but it's because I think it's just that we're off the lakes, right? So the big Great Lakes, and they have a lot of chance to pick up wind and crazy shit happens. Those lakes make their own damn weather, man. They're that big. Lake Superior, especially.
Yeah, lake effect is no joke. That's for
Lake
sure.
effect snow is a motherfucker. That's why I left Ohio. I lived right under Lake Erie. We were in that belt where we got the only benefit was as a kid, you'd get snow days. And other than that, fuck all that snow. You can get hit with it's like if people have seen Buffalo where they get like
It's
several feet in a single
unbelievable,
night.
dude.
You go
Yeah.
out and your car is literally covered. You can't see it. There's snow 1.5 feet on top of it, like the roof on the hood, behind your tires, in front of your door. There are people that open up their door and the whole entire fucking wall is just white. They have to dig themselves out of their home. They're literally snowed in. Not a
Tunnel.
fun situation.
Tunnel themselves out.
Yeah, up here you can actually go in the hardware store and get shovels to shovel off your roof safely without dying, because you don't want the snow to pack on your roof for too long.
Oh yeah.
So here's the Ganja Grid Twitter account. I follow them. It's vibration controlled agriculture. And here's that image that I was kind of describing earlier. Can y'all hear this music?
Nervous
Hopefully
as
not.
shit. No, I don't hear any music.
No.
I can't hear
Okay,
it, probably
good.
because your music is routing to your headphones and not your speakers.
No, that's good. It's copyrighted, so I didn't want it to be
Oh,
playing.
good.
God, that makes me nervous.
It makes me nervous too.
Say, dude, I'm
Is the water like an
Round
integral part
full.
of it, or
No, it's not. It's just kind of I think it's just demonstrating the vibration.
I see.
Yeah, that is like anxiety inducing shit right there.
We're all cringing a little. I can feel it collectively.
so?
I'm gonna look away now.
It's even worse that it's worse that it's shaken to me, because now you're shaking into the bud. Stop.
So, I see. But is the vibration controlling the agriculture? That's my question.
Well, maybe are they claiming some kind of fungal defense, like they can't somehow take hold when it's shaken?
I don't think they're making any of those claims, to be honest. I just think this is how they like to grow. Their whole claims are that the vibration is just beneficial, and it's like using whatever justification you can call it, like wind, how
Yeah,
wind
I
can
can see
provide positive
that.
stress, or
Mechanostimulation, I think. Yeah, ganja grid,
mechanostimulation
right?
is the
Yeah.
exact term that they typically use, but also
Thigmopriming.
Twerk Tuesday. Like this one, there's not a bunch of water all over it.
I love
you
it.
can-
Twerk Tuesday, nice.
But I mean, it's frosty ass buds. I mean, he's not doing a bad job. And
Oh, yeah, it's like a
not to say that the
snow-
shaking is what makes the buds frosty or anything, but I don't think that it's like the worst idea in the whole world, but I also don't know if it's worth. One of these things we examined a while back was talking about Spartan just mentioned it, the speakers vibrations playing, and the speaker was
Yeah.
so damn loud that he thought the vibration is actually what was causing the benefit, not the music itself. And when I looked into that study, the speaker was using like, I want to say at a minimum 150 watts, but it might have been 1000 watts or something.
Oh my
crazy.
gosh, I didn't
So
think
they
about
were-
that.
They were cranking a shit ton of electricity to play this music. And I'm like, if you're going to play a speaker, you might as well just run an extra light or something, like it was like a greenhouse setting and they're just cranking speakers like outside. But it would have to be very low electrical use for me to even consider it, because like I already have fans shaking my plants. I shake my plants once a day. I go in there and give them a little shake, but it's interesting for sure. This was, like I was saying, it wasn't the one that Tao was referring to. So there are other versions of this out there that are metal, and there might even be ones that we're not aware of as well. But it's a interesting concept, and I'm glad we gave it a little more thought and light tonight just to examine
See
it.
if I
Yeah,
can't
that's
find
the
it
first
quick.
I've heard of it. That's kind of cool.
I
Kinda
do
cool,
think
but
it's,
yeah, it depends on the power.
I'm really interested. I mean, that's actually a really significant point. The thing about mechanostimulation or thigmopriming, I actually find it very intriguing, and I think it's sort of overlooked in a way. But at the same time, I think that it's really important to note that like you're at the end of the day, the effects that these sort of like the mechanical stimulation, whether it's sonically through sound vibrations or mechanically through physical vibrations or whatever, you're triggering an immune response. In a lot of research, it shows that. But like it's not like it's magically different than any other thing that triggers immune response. It's different in that it might cause different things to cascade, but they're through the same processes. And I guess what I'm trying to say at the end of the day is that like the amount of caffeine you get in like a frappe or a cappuccino, if there's all the same caffeine, if it's the same coffee and you just make it a little bit different, in how it appears, you're still getting the same thing. If you use a different thing that costs less money or is less involved to do, I guess is what I'm trying to say. You can immune prime certain aspects of the plant's biology differently, and perhaps even if you're not careful, and this is actually the aspect that I'm very curious about, is there a way that you can go too far? Or certainly we know that we can prime our plants in a way that'll make them not as effective in other contexts. And I'd be very interested to see if you could kind of like overstimulate, because certainly that's how a lot of pathogens kill cells. They they exploit a strength that's actually a weakness in a different context, their context.
And I think an obvious one to be the first examined, because it's what the people care about that are cultivating cannabis for the most part, would be yield. Do a side by side, a 4x4, same light, same cut, same veg time, same medium, control as much as you can. And then you do one with a ganja grid and one without it. Because I'm kind of thinking, I shake my plants once a day, and I feel that it does give them a little bit of a umph. But I'm wondering if I shook them all day, every day, if that might, it is creating an immune response, but it's creating it all the time. And then is that taking energy away from building? It's constantly thinking, oh shit, I have to defend myself. I have to get used to this level of shake. Or is it like a human? Like, is there a white noise level of wind or level of mechanostimulation where, okay, I've made my immune response to this frequency, I've gotten shooken hard enough, I'm going to put out more cytokinins or whatever hormone, gibberellins, something like that. And
it does seem to be a desensitization that happens in some research. You're absolutely on the right track there. It's not my area of expertise, but I do find it really fascinating. So I can say that much.
I think in that instance, it would be closer to like the plant adjust to it just like it would wind, and it got like more rigid right there. But once it's rigid, it doesn't have to like continue to stay rigid. It just adapted to that.
Once you're ready, you don't got to get ready, because you already ready. You stay ready.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of
exactly
one of those things.
No, I think you're actually right. And I was kind of joking when I said that with the intense voice, but I've heard like football coaches yell that at me, like, I don't gotta get ready because I stay ready. It's just like always in my head. But the plant, like with the super crop, for example, once you make that knuckle, it's going to take a little time to recover, but then it's stronger, and it may be able to hold more weight in theory. So I think it does take an initial hit, but then it might be able to bounce back stronger. And I'd really love to dial that in. What amount of stimulation is the right amount? And is shaking once a day enough? Is it too much? So it's something I might start playing around with a little bit moving forward. Do one every other day versus one every day, and then like maybe once a week or something. And if I'm noticing like the once a week plant is like a lot weaker, I'll be like, oh, maybe I should start shaking it again type thing. But or if the
wonder
one that's
if-
getting shaken a lot is performing worse, conversely, then maybe shake it a little less.
It'd just be interesting to see like them get real scientific with it and like measure, like do one with, one without, and like measure the girth of the branches, maybe the extra height. Maybe it'll have like, it'll be a shorter plant with big sturdier stems because
Ooh, I
of it.
like that.
Or leaf size, leaf shape, number of petioles on the leaf. Breeder Steve said he does his million seed search, and all of his people are trained agronomically to scientifically categorize the plant. They take a ruler, they say the stem grew 2 centimeters today. It has the narrow leaves and it has 5 blades on the leaves today. And then like a week later, it has 7 blades on the leaves. And they go through and document that for each and every individual plant throughout its growth cycle, and even taking note of if it is different from when it was grown as a seed versus when it was grown from clone later on. And I love that kind of stuff. I think the more of that we get, the better understanding we're going to have of the plant, and the better breeders will be able to start identifying. Like if you look at dog breeding, they know exactly how long the snout is, how long the ear is, the ear shape, the color of the coat, and all these subtle little nuances. And then you can really say like, oh, if I breed a golden retriever to a black lab, I can expect this type of coat and this type of build and this type of weight and even demeanor, down to the demeanor of the dog. And it's like, that might seem crazy to think that we could be that predictive, but I think cannabis is in a sense maybe already at that point with some strains. Like some stuff really dominates and comes through, and it expresses itself in a way that you just always like, oh damn, that's Jack Herrera, or there's Jack Herrera in this, I can smell it. Or Chem Dog, they just come through. But more often than not, I think if there's like this polyhybrid blend, it ends up kind of giving you like a, not a generic weed smell, but a lot of stuff today kind of smells gassy or fuely with a mix of like, I don't know, cakiness and fruitiness or whatever it is, hot, the flavor of the month type thing. So I look forward to seeing more great breeding being done in the cannabis space, where we can start to see those golden retriever type cuts out there that are just so distinct, and we know every little detail about it from its leaf shape and structure. But then again, with plants and cultivating, I think there is and animals are alive too, but plants, like Noah mentioned earlier, farming one season to the next, you might just crush it one run, or just have really bad weather one run, or power went out, or there was wildfires. Like there's so many little factors that really change a plant's life that a wildfire is not going to necessarily change a dog's life as much type thing. But there are other factors there. So not forget about dogs, but think about plants. I'm curious if any of you guys, I know Spartan's on his bliss bud, we could get into the breeding a little bit. How has that project been going?
Actually, it's doing good. I've popped, I'm in the search for a male that I want to work into it. So I've popped the Russell, and that is a Jack Herrera that you just mentioned, back cross to a Chem Dog back cross, like Chem 91 back cross. So I've got a female in flower and a male, 2 male clones in cups right now. And my plans for those are, I want to work that male into my bliss. And then I'm also planning on doing probably at least one more cross with it. And that's the sour diesel that I have, the New York sour diesel to that one. And then
what's the current bliss right now, the original cross you started with?
It's sour D heavy. So it's sour diesel cross to sour strawberried. Actually, sour diesel's one side, and then the other side is a cross of sour strawberried and pineapple Thai. And I hunted through those seeds and picked the most pineapple Thai one I could find. And so it was the pineapple Thai leaner of that cross to a sour D. And then the bliss that is now is like the number 3, but it's really sour D heavy with like a little spiciness behind it. So I'm trying to work some more different flavors in it to get off of, I want it to stand out. I don't want it to be just like sour diesel.
That's
but then I popped, I'm calling it Project V, because I took that when I found those seeds at that old shut down grow shop that they, whoever the new owner was selling out everything that was in there. I found some Vortex seeds, which was my favorite cultivar I ever grew from TGA. And so it was a 5-pack. So I popped them all. And my plan on is just to let them, they're all, regular seeds, they're TGA seeds. And so I'm hoping to get at least one male and one female. And no matter what the combination is, I'm just going to let them grow up together and fucking live and die together. And so it's just going to be a mini, I'm not going to call it a open pollination, but a mini open pollination, just to get, it's like the preserve, man. Cause I mean, I want to, I think that was one of my favorite strains of subs. So I want to have a lot of it out there. So just let them smash together, let them live together in the tent. I cleaned out my tent, and that's what I popped them in my tent.
That'll be fun, man. When those seeds come out, I'll definitely be the first one to raise my hand and say, like, pick me. I'll volunteer as tribute to try and grow these out, see if they're anything good. Because I know that genetic material is stuff that I really enjoyed myself as well in the past. Subcool, still to this day, I think is one of the best breeders in modern cannabis, and made some of the most iconic, enjoyable strains that I've ever come across. So rest in peace to Subcool for sure. And I'm glad that you're able to preserve and share, hopefully, get a decent little handful of those things to spread them around.
I'll give a good grip to them to you for sure. You do what you want.
I know I have some F3 velvet punches that are going to be coming your way in the next month, because I have sufficiently torture tested about it's now 3 velvet punches, because one of them ended up being a male. So I got to talk with Farmer Freeman, because this is the second grow in a row. I thought the first one, maybe I fucked up, and I sent 100 samples to him before. Every single one was accurate. So I'm not trying to slam the guy. I love Farmer Freeman, and I still recommend him. But my last 2 grows, I had a couple Amy Aces, and one of them ended up being a male. So I was like, okay, I was admittedly fairly medicated, not paying the most attention when I sent in those samples. This last run, I was like, okay, I got a fucking male. Maybe I mislabeled something. So I was I think fastidious, maybe is the right word. I was very clear to be accurate with my cutting and sampling. I even cleaned off the scissors between every single cut to make sure that there was no cross-contamination that somehow would get into the sample. And sure enough, one of my Velvet Punch F3s turned into a male. And it may be that it was a Hermie, though, because I did microscope it, and it had a few pistils. It was like 99% male pollen sacs. But then when I actually killed it, I chopped it from the base of the stem right above the soil. Yeah. And I took it over to my light, and I was looking at it under the microscope, like really close. And I was like, this would be the frostiest male I've ever seen. Like, it almost looked like a female that I thought, oh, fuck, like I cut this too soon. Maybe it was actually a female, and it just looked funny. Like, it's an F3. I've never actually bred anything to F3 before. Maybe it's just a weird presentation. But like the female right next to it had thick ass pistils, like shooting out all over the plant. It was very clearly, I've grown a bunch of females. I know what they look like. And the one on the right was looking a lot like a male. So I was like, I chopped it. And when I looked at it, I did see a few pistils, and I was like, fuck, maybe I chopped it too soon. Maybe I chopped it too soon. And I actually went back and took some Gorilla Tape around the stem and tried to stick it back on like a grafting, basically. And I know from my grafting technique that I should have probably done it at an angle and like gone around it. Yeah. But even though I didn't do that, it came back to life. Like, it got droopy and it survived like another day or two. And then I looked at it and it developed a little more, and I was like, oh, this is for sure at least presenting male. And it might even be like how I've talked about in the past with feminized seeds. There's certain females that look all male, but it's really a female genetically, because like I said, I was very, very careful to send in the samples, and he sent me back a female result for that plant. But I only saw maybe 3 or 4 pistils on the entire plant, and the rest of the plant looked like mini balls starting to form and like pollen sacs. But when I busted them up and dried them up, there wasn't any pollen coming out. So this is I wish I would have taken more pictures of it.
Just a late developer, maybe it was just going to bust later.
That could have been it. And that's what I didn't want to happen. It was right before my anniversary trip. So I was going to be gone for 4 days. And I was like, I know how males work at this point.
Yeah,
like early week 2 or like week 3 to flower. I'm like, not a good time to take that risk. And especially because this run, I promised my wife, like, my last 2 Velvet Punch runs were seeded. So she wanted to try it without seeds, like rightfully so. So you don't have to fucking break down seeds. And so I'm like, all right, we're going to run this F3 run just for flower only. And then fucking a male shows up and it's like, I think the jaw telling me like, maybe you need to make F4s, but it's like, not today. Chop that fucker. And even though it did come back to life, it did start to look a little bit like droopy after about a day. And before I left, I was like, I'm not gonna leave it there, and ended up pulling it. But yeah,
I
feel like
have
I've
that
give it a bunch.
advertisement, by the way.
Oh, okay, let's see it. Yeah, the
Oh, yeah,
fancy
yeah.
lighting.
Alrighty.
Here it is.
Oh yeah, it was lasers, the good old laser claim. I actually looked into this like 2 years ago, so I have some decent information to share about what they're trying to claim and why it's not actually accurate.
Laser.
I'm interested to hear that. Yeah, just go for it.
Okay, so lasers are light, but they're high intensity light. So I thought to myself about a year ago, why do they not use like laser pointers, right? Those little battery powered, you stick a little battery in it and shoots out a red laser. Like, can't we measure that? And then like, wouldn't that grow plants really well? Well, they tried to do that with like a NASA space station techniques and everything. They wanted to do it so I think they could attempt to grow plants more efficiently on the space station type thing. And what they found was it just at this point isn't super effective. I think it might be just the lighting is too intense when you concentrate it down to a laser. So it couldn't be run for the only lighting option. It could be used as like a supplemental lighting. So maybe if they're using that as part of the light, that could be a thing. But yeah, like not a whole 100% laser, but they're talking about Schumann resonance, and that's nothing that was ever discussed. And a lot of these other claims I'll let you get into, but I'm dubious of their legitimacy.
It's like their laser says 660 and 450 nanometer lasers.
So, and those are actually two lights that I've added to my light. And with data, there's data that shows 660 nanometer red and improves photosynthesis. 440, it's close enough to 450, but I've seen research that showed 440 nanometer blue increases terpene production. And it also, there was one other thing that it did, and I can't recall right now, but it does lead to contraction of the cells of living plants. So like for the growth, it makes it a little bit tighter if you run a lot of it. But I'd imagine they're doing it in a fairly light ratio.
Does it say anywhere on here how much power this thing even draws? I'm not seeing that.
That's a good question. Let's see if we can discover that together.
There was something else on there that we kind of that Earth Sense Schumann grounding bullshit. I'm sorry, perfectly reasonable
Intelligent microprocessor. Bro.
paragraph.
It's an intelligent microprocessor.
The
unintelligent microprocessor. I hate those.
The flux is a flux capacitor
Injected directly into the potted soil environment.
I thought that wording was particularly interesting to see. So yeah, so I don't claim to understand it very much myself, but the Schumann resonance is a real thing. It is a real thing. But what the thing is, what they're saying it does is, it's not the part that's supported that I understand at all. But it is EM radiation. It's a real thing. It's a factor of sort of astrophysical effects that again are not really in my wheelhouse.
EM, for those who don't know, is electromagnetic.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And they're so I don't really understand how they're injecting it into the soil, because it's like background electromagnetic radiation. And presumably if you're on Earth, you're probably, yeah. So
that's what it's supposed to be.
It's like the magnet or the moon thing, because like the gravitational force of like the moon on big things is different, but on small things, if you have less mass, you're going to be affected by the Earth's mass much more than you're going to be affected by anything else. And that always was sort of interesting to me. Or like, magnetism is also like that, right? The Earth's magnetic field in aggregate is really big, but
so this could be equivalent to saying we're harnessing the Earth's frequency, because like it's like pitching like something that's already on Earth, all of us. It's like this runs
it would be like saying,
well in an oxygen environment.
Yeah, it'd be like this injects some 10% more nitrogen into your air. Well, who cares? It's already there. They have 70% nitrogen in there now.
Well, they've got UVA and UVB on top of the additional outputs of light that we saw at the 660 and 450.
Hey, I thought about nitrous oxide. How about filling the tent with nitrous oxide? Would that help the plants out?
Might help you. Maybe
Yeah,
go
definitely would
faster.
help me. I'll be smiling. I know that. Talking all
I don't know.
funny.
Nitrous makes me a great grower, man.
Grow real
Yeah, if I
fast.
fumigate with a yeah. Also, I would be afraid of, I mean, wouldn't that hurt your eyes? Right? Am I wrong? Like, wouldn't having UVB being produced, could that potentially be degradative to your eyes? I feel like the
It
answer is
is
yes.
for sure. Even
Yeah.
even 440 nanometer blue and even those blue LEDs, Equal actually shared a lot of research about just the harmful nature of blue LED. Like
That's why I wear my sunglasses at night. You got to protect them eyes, man.
I do in the garden, no joke. I mean,
I thought it was just because you're really cool.
Well, that's a
That too.
given. I don't need the shades for that.
Both.
That's true.
thermal
Just wearing-
sensor, automatic
just
power
wearing
level
to
control.
hide
Can we
my
go
red
back?
eyes.
What is that
Yeah.
benefiting outside? I guess maybe if it's so hot, it can turn itself off, like as an alarm.
Like a controller, like light controllers do, but I guess they do it independently, maybe. Just what you need, one more thing to go wrong.
Does anyone know the
Yeah.
cost or the wattage draw on this thing?
I do not know. Let's see if
they're at 25
this
watt
was
motors.
this was a part
Says
that I was very
600
curious
watts.
about.
There's 600.
600 watts.
Right
Oh
there.
yeah, it says right here. Yeah.
Advanced.
All right.
100. Well, it says it's
1367 in the middle
total
there.
power at 600.
And
Dude, what a terrible par
1614
map.
on the right.
Holy shit, this is the worst fucking par map I've ever seen. Look at the edges,
Awful
120,
distribution. Awful
unusable,
distribution.
and then
Yeah.
1600 in the middle. You're gonna fry. This is like a HPS looks better than
Yes.
this on a par map.
Exactly.
Do you guys want to
Well,
go into
it's
that
got
more?
higher-
That's
It's got higher numbers than an HPS, but it looks exactly like an HPS layout.
Yeah, so it's really powerful in the middle, and with the LED distribution, what you want to see instead of a really hot center, like we're seeing even on this lower where it says 1367 U mules on the left side, you see 1345 center, 1270 center, 1289, 1367, 1269, and 1257 are like the main middle square. For those who don't know, over 1,000 ppfd without CO2 is going to basically fry your plants. They're not going to be able to keep up. They're going to struggle. You're going to need to supplement CO2 up to at least double what you're running. Like at natural levels, about 400. So you're going to want to have at least 800 parts per million to be able to run as high as 1500 ppf. And like this 1600, that's like, even if you have 800 CO2, which is about as high as you really want or need, you're not going to, there's diminishing returns after that. So if you get like 1500 ppms of CO2, you're going to be able to run the lights. It's about the same level as you do 800 or 900. And anything over 2000 is dangerous too. So I'll add that in there. But this light right off the bat, even if you have CO2 dialed in, is going to make the middle of your canopy struggle. So that would be my first concern with it. The other claims are actually sort of irrelevant at that point, because it makes itself so unusable, because you'd have to either hang it so high and run so many of them, or just like as an individual light, if you had to run one of these, I think it would be one of the worst performing lights you'd probably come across.
I will say this,
lasers.
as a 600 watt, having a number like 1614 in the middle, I've never seen anything like that. And I was shopping for commercial LEDs that look a lot like this in the 600 to 1000 watt range. What's that?
Because you don't want that. You don't want.
Well, if you have a 15-foot ceiling, you can put that all the way up on the ceiling and put them butt to butt and have them all over the place, and have even distribution. I mean, that's essentially what I do with the Easy 8s. Is they're really powerful lights, and they're 8 feet in the air,
but those have an even distribution to start. So like it's
right
from the top to the bottom. This is literally like a laser beam on your ceiling.
I'm just,
it's going to be hot even if you hang it high.
This light is shit.
Like hanging cobs on your ceiling.
Yeah, no, this light is shit. I'm just,
it's worse
I
than
guess
hanging cobs.
Potentially, those numbers are intriguing, I guess, is all. They're high.
Here are the unique advantages of the laser system. Photophilous crops, which I hope that they're photophilous. I don't know. There's very few plants that don't like light. Thrive and have a stronger disease resistance. However, or whatever that is, I'm not sure. It increases yield and quality. That's always good. It's always important. Let's see what else here. Promotes gibberellic acid and hydroxylase gene SH expression. I do not know.
I don't know why you want to
what that
promote.
refers.
If you get too much gibberellic, you're just going to get a lot of stretch.
What?
It's even
That is
better
a big
because
claim, dude.
That's
yeah,
a light PGR, bro.
yeah, it's light PGR is like definitely not organic.
I love that they just try to use like terms that sound scientific and make it seem like it's better, like photophilous crops. Like you just said, pretty much all crops are photophilous. So like they're just trying to seem sciencey, and like this is clearly just trying to over qualify themselves to people that don't have a lot of information. And a lot of lighting companies kind of give you a bunch of science, and maybe it's over most people's head. But this is like taking that to the next level. The one thing I said when I saw this initially was the only claim that they haven't made that I see a lot of other LEDs make is it's better than the sun. Like that's
oh
they made
sure.
every other claim other than like this light's so good it's even better than the sun spectrum, which some
Yeah.
are bold enough to make that claim. But
Well, this is
Apparently
only
not them.
page 4, man, or 5. So there's 5 more I can see.
Yeah.
They try to muddy the waters to make it look deeper.
If
but
you
that's
want
it.
to
We
know
gotta let
why,
Spartan jump out real quick, and then
Oh,
we
yeah.
could maybe keep on tearing through this.
All right.
Yeah,
Thanks,
Spartan.
guys. I'm gonna jump out of here. Let the dogs out. They're ready already. But this was a good one, guys. I love this show. And shout out to chat too, because they were really involved. And I love just sitting and hanging with you guys every week. So thanks for the opportunity to do it every week. This is the show that I have done the longest. This is one that kind of I broke into. So it's always been special to my heart because of that. So it's cool to be continuing to do it.
We're happy to have you, and I'm glad,
Yeah,
even
thanks
though
for being here.
I missed the last
Hell
2
yeah.
weeks, you guys kept the show running, and that's what this is all about. It's a whole team effort.
Yep, it was good.
My-
It was good. I still missed you though, man.
I'm happy to be back.
Take it easy, Spartan. Good to see you, man.
Have a great one, man.
Yeah, I just have to say that, like, I mean, if this is why I bring up complicated things sometimes, or I get a little bit or a lot of it into the weeds, because like this doesn't make sense to somebody who understands even like kind of basic plant biology, or even like basic ecology, or like trophic level stuff, like just kind of how it goes from like light to primary producers, secondary producers, that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's just really important, because then you don't get hoodwinked by people who they hit you with a photophilous crops thrive and have stronger disease resistance with like nothing else.
Not even a
To say.
citation. No
You're
citation.
just gonna roll over for no data. It's funny. I had somebody on my Instagram account recently criticize me for saying that I never cite my sources, which I thought was very surprising. I'm usually catching flack for maybe the consideration that I over rely on academic or empirical sources, but like this is why that's important, in my opinion.
Well, and then you reply to that comment, which is important to say. You put the sources literally in the description of every one of your videos, and they were commenting, complaining like, "You're not making the sources easy enough to find."
I don't know. I can't win on that one, I suppose. I'll have to do better.
I'll say this: you can't please everybody. So I
That's
don't think
true.
you have to do better. That's just they're going to have to reevaluate their circumstances there.
Perhaps a little bit, but yeah, and also sometimes people like I like to take footage from people. Some of those people I think are even in the chat here right now or in the past, who have made some great footage, and I love to credit them. Although I'll be honest, if you can believe it, sometimes people who send me pests don't want it associated with their name, and they ask me to not put their name out there, which is totally fair, and I respect people's privacy too. So. Yeah, that's an interesting topic, but yeah, I think it's really important to be honest about where you're deriving the conclusions that you're making. And it's easy to just say that you do something scientifically, or if it's science based. You could say that your diet is plant based, but if 50% of it is meat or 80% of it is meat, is it plant based? I don't know. Like that's why the details are always more important than the marketing point. Should this be the teaser? Should we?
I think a lot of people, just to cap that a little bit, I think a lot of people like are intimidated by how fucking smart you are and how well versed you are with this stuff. And you know, and to some people that's encouraging. Like obviously a lot of the people that hang out here, we fucking love that shit. It encourages us, it propels us. And some people are just, you know, they're gonna fuck their lives up with every relationship they make, including yours. So don't worry about it.
That's very touching. I appreciate it. That is an endearing point to make. Some people just think differently than you, and you have to accept that.
And sometimes people are actually wrong. I mean, like we don't want to say it because like the customer is always right kind of thing, or like the follower or whatever it is at this point. But sometimes people are actually wrong. And then sometimes science is wrong. Like with this current pandemic, the thoughts on everything changes a lot. So like people are wrong at one point and then they adjust when the new science comes out. And somebody commented that like, you know, the medical establishment, unrelated to the pandemic, hasn't always been the best, right? We used to do lobotomies on people, which is like we drill into their brains and shit to try and make them better. And now we know that that's not the best idea, and we've advanced our sciences and moved forward. But that being said, I still think that our current medical state has a lot of questionable practices that might not be as effective in some cases as we might hope that they were. But I won't get too deep into that. We've got about 9 minutes left, so we'll keep it on the canvas side of things. And I guess maybe I'll pass it over to Aaron and ask, because a lot of the people here probably didn't get to tune in late night last night to catch the episode of Talking Shit with Eagle there. But how are things going in the garden? We talked a little bit about it at the beginning when you jumped in. What kind of strains are you growing over there? You brought your own soil. Did you bring any of your own genetics? And how is everything?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Jack. I did. I brought my own soil. I brought my own genetics. Of course, traveling with live plants is risky. So that's actually why the plant packer was invented. I was like searching online. I'm like, I'm not going to pay $30 a unit for these clone shippers. So like, let's put something together. So my wife and I put this plant packer together, and just out of a few different parts, and we modified some of the inserts, and it's like, this is going to work, man. And we got 90 some plants, you know, from California to Oklahoma. And, so people started asking about it, and we just said, fuck it, let's start making this shit and put it on the website. And it's been working out. But yeah, so I have my genetics here. Right now I'm running Sunday Driver. That's a Black Sheep Farms cut. I think they're in Oregon. There's a bunch of different black sheep out there in the cannabis industry, but I think these guys are in Oregon. I got the cut through Zen Farms. Super fire. Can't wait. It's kind of a lower yielder, but it's like, just, I wanted to come out of the gate swinging for the fence, like on quality. So I got that going. I got Blue Cookies, and then I have some Baja Blast. So really excited about those strains. And yeah, and check out Eagle's show, man. I had a lot of fucking fun. I got fucked up last night, man. I ate a glob of RSO, and it was I always have a lot of fun with him. He brings out the worst and best in me.
It was a good time. I jumped in the Wee Nerd world there after and hung out for a little bit. It was a
oh yeah, you were in the chat. Thanks for, yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah.
No problem, man. Got to support the growing with my fellow growers members and everybody over there. It's a good show, good dude, Eagle, and Smiley with the organics takeovers, and also the Michigan Bros Grow Show, another great show that's about to come on in about 7 minutes from now. So in about a minute or two, we'll go into our final thoughts and shout outs. But I want to ask Aaron a little follow up on the Sunday Driver. I know that's a Canorado, or I should say, I assume it's a Canorado genetic, and I believe it's a Fruity Pebbles OG crossed to something else. I can't remember, maybe wedding cake or something. What kind of smells are you getting coming off that? And is that what was the actual cross, if you remember?
I think is it grape pie?
That's it. Grape pie and Fruity Pebbles OG, maybe, or grape pie and something else.
I think my connection might be fucked. Can you hear me? Okay, all right. Well, I'm pretty sure it's FPOG and grape pie, if I remember correctly.
I just Googled, and Leafly is agreeing with you, so I will go ahead and say that is correct, and that's what it, if I remembered correctly, and I didn't. I thought it was wedding cake, but grape pie. it's, are you getting any grapiness? Are you getting any like fruity pebble phenos? Like what kind of smells do you get when you, or have you ran it through flower? Or is this your first time flowering it?
This I have a different Sunday driver cut that I've run before. This will be the first time for this particular selection. Yeah, they're both Canner Auto, just selected by different folks. The other one that I have is actually pretty fucking gassy coming out of that FPO, but this one has more of a fruity, and this will be the first time. So I'm in like week 3, and it's got a little bit of fruit and certainly some sweetness. I'm excited to see what comes of it.
Nice, man. I love the fruity pebbles. I just had a sample of it last night. It was pretty decent. Not the best one that I've ever come across, but I love some of those sweeter smells. The grape pie parent is a lot like the velvet punch. It's got the same ester, methyl anthranilate, which makes that artificial grape flavoring that many of us know from Kool-Aid or different candies and medicines and things like that. But the velvet punch definitely is a lot gassier. It's got the grape kind of candy flavor with a little bit of fuel in there as well. The F3s, I've got a pheno that I am kind of referring to as like the OMGG, like, oh my goodness, because it makes me say that involuntarily when I smell it. I just like, Velvet Punch has had this tendency. I'll smell it and let out like, and it's normally like an oh my god, but I'm just calling it oh my goodness. And I was thinking like oh my goodness grapecious or oh my grape gas, like OMGG kind of thing for like the F3s, just as like a name for one of the phenos or something like that. But it is definitely super grapey, and I'm looking forward to sending those out to all the F2 testers who grew them. So shout out to anybody who grew the Velvet Punch F2. You're going to get F3s in the next month or so. So you won't have to do anything. I've got your address. I will contact you ahead of time to make sure it is the same address that you're at for the F2s, because it's been a while. But I have that to look forward to on the horizon. And with that said, I want to make sure everybody gets their time to give their final thoughts and shout outs. First, starting with Aaron the Grower.
Thanks, Jack. This has been a fucking blast. Really missed you guys, and I'm glad to start to carve some time out for this. I'm actually sitting at the tip of my barn now. I got the phone connecting me to my hotspot, so I have a halfway decent connection. Because Lord knows if I use my satellite internet, you'll hear me tomorrow. So I'm Aaron the Grower, atgacres.com, atgacres on Instagram. Check me out. I'd love to answer questions on either one of those places. Yeah, I don't know. That's it, man. Love you guys.
We love you too, man. Always happy to have you, and lots of growers love from the chat and the community around afterwards. They're happy to have you back. I saw some comments on the last show praising and cheering that you were back with us. So I am very happy to have you as well, and to be able to be here present with you, not physically, but on the Zoom call. It's been great this past hour, and we look forward to having you more in the future. And with that said, we got Noah the Grower.
Yeah, I had a great time today, and yeah, I'm Noah the Grower with 2 E's. You can find me there on Instagram, and most weeks here with everybody, and I'll see everybody next week.
Thanks again for joining us, Noah. And next up, we've got Matthew Gates.
I really enjoyed this conversation because we got to talk about kind of interesting sort of maybe questionable products, and also aspects of them that aren't as questionable. And I always love to talk about this stuff. As you well know, if you like more content about that kind of thing, you can check me out on Zentinol.com for professional inquiries, Zentinol on YouTube as well. You can join my IPM Discord, over 110 people now, I think, which is my Patreon, patreon.com/Zentinol, and then Discord, of course. You get the link for subscribing. And you can also get me on @SyncAngel, Instagram, and Twitter. And I post a lot of interesting research reports there as well.
Pleasure having you as always. I appreciate that you do actually share your sources despite the claims, and that you come on and you share so much good information with us here on this show each week, but also on your individual platform. So I do encourage people to support that Patreon, even if it's just at $1 a month to start and get access to that Discord. It's a great community over there, and the IPM is much needed. And trust me, it'll come get to you someday. Not to scare you, but it's better to be prepared than not. So thank you again, Matthew. And last and certainly not least, the American one. If you can find his mute button. while he's looking
Yeah,
for
it
it.
didn't come up. I'm all right. I'm back. Jack, as always, thanks for being the host. You always do an excellent job of that. It's always awesome talking with all you boys about cannabis and its intricacies. And it's always good checking in on chat. I wish I could be there more. But yeah, I'm the American One on YouTube and the American One _ A Keens on the IG. Most of you know me. And yeah, have a great week. Grow is love.
Thanks for joining us, Tao. Pleasure to have you as always. And I'm Les, and you can find me right here at Jack Greenstock on Instagram. Here every week for most weeks, I should say, on the YouTube, and then Jack_Greenstock on Twitter. And if you want a copy of my book, 50 Strains of Green, you can go to 50strains.com. I'm working on 50 Strains of Purple. It's not out yet. A lot of people have asked, hey, when can I get my copy? Hopefully by Christmas time this year is the goal. Maybe even Thanksgiving if I really put the work in. But it's underway. It'll also be on 50strains.com if you're looking for a copy of that. And thank you everybody for the support. I want to give a few shout outs before we go. Thunder Dan, 4x4 Closed the Door, Purple Thumb, Dirt Road Dude, Laura Camp, Weedus 207, Jim Owen, and Ty Grow. Thank you guys all so much. Crack Babies DWC. It's great seeing you all every week. I know there's many, many more that I didn't get to name, but we appreciate you listening live. We appreciate everybody who listens after the fact on the podcast, which I'm going to try and upload as soon as possible. So thank you all and have a great week. Jack Greenstock signing out. Peace and love. And for Dr. MJ, growers love everybody. Catch you next week.